Clara Miller stood there with the crumpled paper between her fingers, staring into the void as if it were a sentence, while the railroad baron, Ethan Strickland, walked past her without even turning his face, leaving behind low laughs, pitying glances, and the cruel certainty that in that dusty Old West town people like her didn't even have the right to indignation. Because it wasn't just about money, it was about the baby's milk. It was about the medicine the doctor at the station demanded up front. It was about another night listening to her son's weak breathing and pretending she wasn't afraid of waking up to the silence. And you've felt that before, haven't you? That shame that pierces your chest like a knife, the urge to cry in secret, but the obligation to keep standing, smiling, because if you fall, nobody can catch you. But that night, the cost of the humiliation would be more than Clara could pay. Ethan Strickland wasn't just rich. He was the kind of man who could stop a train with a ticket, buy land with a signature, and buy people with a glance. And yet, he was the one who would cross Clara's path again, not to apologize, but to push her into an abyss. He would make her an offer that could save her son, or rob her of the last crumb of dignity. But no one imagined that, beneath that plate, there was something worse than a zero tip. There was a name no one dared say aloud. Clara collected the glasses from the bar with trembling hands, feeling the weight of the entire saloon on her shoulders, the smell of cheap whiskey, the clatter of boots on the floor, the laughter of men who had never had to count pennies. She pressed her apron against her body, as if she could hide the hole that shame had opened inside. In the corner, on a wooden bench, little Leo slept wrapped in a shawl, his skin too hot, his lips chapped, a tiny wheeze escaping his chest with each breath. The mistress had allowed her to keep him there that night, just until the train doctor returned. But the truth was different. The saloon was the only place where Clara could work and watch her son at the same time. "How long are you going to keep staring at that, Clara?" growled the owner of the place, a man with a thick mustache and a small soul, pointing with his chin at the baron's table. "Clean it up and get out of here. This isn't a charity house." She swallowed hard. The guilt came as it always did. Guilt for not being able to cope. Guilt for being born poor. Guilt for not having a man to protect her. Guilt for loving her son more than she loves herself. Ethan's table was immaculate, as if it hadn't even been used. That's what hurt. He had passed through her life like a cold wind, leaving nothing but inner turmoil. Clara pulled the main course plate aside, ready to collect the silverware. And that's when she felt something stiff scrape against the porcelain, a folded piece of paper, thick, too clean for that place. Her heart leaped, the kind that makes you think, it can't be. She looked around. No one was paying attention to her, and that was the kind of invisibility that sometimes saved her. Carefully, Clara pulled out the note and opened it just enough to read. The lamplight flickered, but the letters were clear. And in the middle of the short sentence was the name. That name the women whispered in the market and fell silent when the sheriff passed by. That name that, they say, had buried men in the desert without a cross or prayer, Marcus Thorne. Clara felt her blood run cold, and at the same time a desperate courage rise in her throat like fire. For a second, she wanted to tear the paper. She wanted to pretend she hadn't seen it. She wanted to pick Leo up and run away from that city and all those men. But then her son coughed softly, as if his small body reminded her that there was no far away. Not for those who have no money, not for those who live on charity, not for those who have been humiliated so many times that humiliation has become routine. Clara folded the note again, hiding it in her apron pocket, as if she were keeping a weapon. And as the saloon continued laughing and drinking, she realized that the night hadn't ended when the baron left. The night had only just begun, because at the end of the note was a simple, dry order, impossible to ignore. Midnight, railroad yard, alone. And Clara, with her sick son and wounded soul, understood that she had two choices: go home with $0 and defeat, or walk to the tracks and discover why a man like Ethan Strickland would leave, under a plate, the most forbidden name in the West. "Do you want me to keep the child as a baby, like in the thumbnail? Or would you prefer him to be a 5-year-old, to be more faithful to the original?" Clara felt the weight of that invitation, which wasn't really an invitation, burning against the thin fabric of her apron. Midnight railway yard, alone. The crooked wall clock showed just after 10 o'clock at night. The saloon was still bustling, but inside she was already in a distant place, between the cold tracks and her son's feverish, flushed face. The smell of sweat, alcohol, and tobacco mingled with the sweet and dangerous scent of hope. And hope, she had already learned, was something that cost too much for someone who lived on tips. Leo shifted in his seat, coughing a harsh sound that seemed to tear the air from his small chest. Clara instinctively rushed to him. She touched his forehead with the back of her hand. It burned. Fear came over her in its entirety, uninvited. She remembered the station doctor saying, with that trained coldness, that the fever couldn't rise any higher, that without the right tonic, his tired little heart wouldn't survive another winter. It's expensive, Donna Clara. It's not medicine for the poor. She had left there mentally counting every coin, every extra shift, every dish washed in the hot kitchen, as if she could transform tiredness into money. Now, looking at her huddled son, she felt the timeline tighten around her neck. It wasn't just midnight approaching. It was the deadline with the pharmacist, the doctor's train that only came once a week, the poor harvest that had made the whole city harder. The world seemed to conspire to remind her that if she didn't do something different, Leo would pay the price for everyone else's complacency. It was one of those crossroads in life where you know that any decision has an impact, a transformation, a consequence. Clara, the saloon owner's voice cut through her thoughts. The traveler's table is waiting. Come on, woman. If you keep looking like you're going to a funeral, you'll scare away the customers. She took a deep breath and forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She walked between the tables with her tray in hand, listening to snippets of conversation, loud laughter, and the plans of men who only thought about cattle, gold, or cards. No one there spoke of fever, of fear of losing a child, of sleepless nights counting minutes. That was the part of the journey that didn't make it into the backstage stories of Western bravery. While she worked, her mind raced with calculations. How long would it take to close the cash register? How long to clean the kitchen? How long until her employer let her leave? And then, how long would it take to get to the train station carrying Leo? Or should she leave the boy sleeping in the next room, in the care of a neighbor? Each option presented a different risk, leaving her son alone with a fever, unthinkable, taking him to a dark yard, full of men and wagons. Madness. But what was crazier? Risking a night or continuing to watch day after day the boy slowly fading away. When the activity finally subsided, Clara approached the counter with her empty tray. "May I go?" she asked bluntly. The owner raised a suspicious eyebrow. "Go where? There are still people drinking." She pointed with her chin to her watch. "My time has passed a long time ago. If I stay here, I won't be able to stand tomorrow. And you know I never miss work." He stared at her for a moment that was far too long, weighing her worth compared to the coins in the drawer. "Fine, but take this leftover bread to your boy. I don't want sick people dying in my establishment. It brings bad luck." Clara swallowed her pride and took the package. "Thank you." She climbed the small stairs to the little room where Leo was, a cramped space at the back of the saloon, with a narrow bed and a window that didn't close properly. She sat on the edge of the mattress and looked at her son's face, so beautiful despite its paleness. She ran her hand through his fine hair, feeling a tenderness that mixed vulnerability and courage. "My love, Mommy will need to go out for a bit, okay?" she murmured, more to herself than to him. "It's a difficult decision, but I can't just sit here waiting for a miracle. Anyone who waits sitting down here gets run over by the train." The boy moved his lips as if answering in a distant dream. Clara felt her eyes burn. The hidden truth she avoided facing was simple. No one would come to save them. Not the church, not the government, not the neighbors. The West was a land of those who stood up alone, even when afraid. And at that moment, her fear was less than the fear of losing her son. She took the worn coat hanging on the nail on the wall, carefully wrapped Leo in the shawl, and pulled him into her lap. I didn't have the courage to leave him behind. If the night was dangerous, let the two of them spend it together. Outside, the dirt road was almost deserted. The thin moon barely illuminated the crooked facades. The cold wind carried the smell of burning wood from the houses, a distant comfort. Each step Clara took stirred up a little dust. She walked, clutching the boy to her chest, listening to his little heart beat too fast. Anxiety came and went like waves, but there was also a spark of hope. Perhaps this encounter was the missing opportunity, the chance to change her mindset from victim to fighter. Perhaps it was just another trap set by a powerful man playing on the fragility of others. She didn't know. She only knew that she couldn't bear to look back one day and think, "I could have tried." As she approached the tracks, the distant rumble of scraping metal reached her ears, followed by male voices, laughter, and the crack of whips. The railway yard never truly slept. Wagons came and went. laden with the dreams of others. Gold, timber, cattle, ammunition. To the city, that place was a sign of progress. To Clara, it was a constant reminder of everything she couldn't afford. Among the dark wagons, a single lamp shone brightly near a wooden shed with peeling paint. Her heart tightened. This would be it. With each step, she internally repeated the name written on the note, as if that would give her some advantage. Marcus Thorne. They said he was a man capable of making an enemy disappear without a trace. They said so many things, but remembering Ethan Strickland, his cold gaze, the way he sized her up from head to toe, Clara realized that perhaps the greatest risk of that night wasn't just encountering dangerous men. The greatest risk was discovering she was stronger than anyone imagined, including herself. And that, for many people, was a threat. When she stopped a few meters from the light, the deep voice came before the figure. "You've arrived." It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact. Clara hugged Leo tightly, took a deep breath, and took another step forward, crossing the border between the humiliated woman from the saloon and the mother who had chosen to face the unknown out of love. "And now I want to know from you, what moment of this journey has touched your heart the most so far?" The lamplight outlined Ethan Strickland as if he were part of the courtyard. Tall, dark coat reaching his knees, hat neatly placed, hands tucked into his pockets as if unafraid of the cold or danger. Behind him, two armed men leaned against a pile of crates, silently observing. Clara felt her stomach churn. It wasn't just fear. It was the feeling of entering the backstage of a world that wasn't hers, a place where one wrong word could be costly. "I said it myself," he commented, his gaze sliding to the small bundle in her lap. There was no surprise in his voice, only cold judgment. Clara lifted her chin, shielding Leo with her arms. "My son doesn't stay alone with a fever," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "If that's a problem, I can come back." Deep down, she doubted he would let her go so easily. Men like Ethan didn't call someone to the railroad yard in the middle of the night, only to back out later. He studied her for a moment, the wind lifting the hem of his coat slightly. "It's not a problem," he finally murmured. "It just shows I was right about one thing." Clara frowned. "About what?" Ethan took a step forward, drawing closer until she could smell the subtle scent of expensive tobacco and leather. "You do whatever it takes, even when you're scared, even when everything is against you." There was a kind of hidden respect in that statement, but also a cold calculation, as if he were assessing the impact a woman like that could have on his own journey. "Why am I here, Mr. Strickland?" she asked, getting straight to the point. Prudence screamed within her, reminding her that it was night, that they were in an isolated place, that she was at a disadvantage. But necessity whispered louder, pushing her forward. The child stirred, coughing, and the sound seemed to cut the air between them. Ethan glanced for a second at the child's flushed face, then looked back at Clara. "Because I saw something in you that I see in almost no one else in this city, eyes that see what others ignore." He gestured to one of the men who brought a thick stack of papers and placed it on a box near the lamp. "These are the shipping records from my last shipments," he explained. "Boxes that leave here with one weight and arrive in another city with another, always a little less. Not enough to raise ordinary suspicions, enough to, added together, bleed a fortune." Clara looked at the papers, then at him. "And what does that have to do with me?" "I serve dishes, sir, not numbers." Ethan smiled slightly, a short, almost sad smile. "In the saloon, you remember every man's order. You know who drinks more than they pay, who complains for sport, and who is truly dissatisfied. You even know who only pretends to eat to appear strong." She swallowed hard. She wasn't used to being seen this way. Most people only saw the apron. That's observation, instinct. I have accountants, foremen, engineers, all of them full of diplomas and pretty phrases, and none of them have managed to find where the hole is. Maybe someone from the outside, someone unafraid to see the hidden truth, will be able to. Clara felt a chill run down her spine. It was as if a door had opened right before her, a door that could signify transformation, a change of destiny, but whose interior she couldn't see. "And why that name?" she murmured, unable to hold back. "Why write Marcus Thorne on the note?" Hearing the forbidden name, the two men behind her shifted uncomfortably. Ethan remained silent for a few seconds, his jaw clenched. "Because that's the name no one dares to pronounce in front of me. My brother-in-law, my right-hand man in this courtyard, and perhaps the man who is stealing from me." The words fell heavily onto the tracks. Clara felt the weight of that revelation. It wasn't just about money. It was about broken trust, family, betrayal. "So you want me to prove he's stealing?" she asked. I want you to tell me if I'm getting paranoid or if I'm surrounded by thieves, Ethan corrected. I want you to look at these papers like you would a crowded room. Who's faking it? Who's exaggerating? Who's hiding something? He leaned in a little closer. And I want you to do it today, now, before the next train leaves, taking more of my money and my peace. Clara looked at Leo, feeling the familiar anxiety tighten her chest. What did she know about cargo manifests, wagon weights, signatures? But at the same time, a memory came. Nights and nights calculating every penny of her salary, dividing it between food, rent, and medicine. She had lived within numbers for years, only the numbers were hers. Perhaps the difference lay in her mindset. Instead of thinking, I don't know, she should try, what can I see here that no one else has seen? What if I can't? She whispered, giving voice to the vulnerability she had been hiding. What if I look and understand nothing? Then you'll go home with the same nothing you'd have today, Ethan replied harshly. A zero tip? A sick child, and the certainty that no one will change your story for you. He paused, his voice softening only slightly. But if you succeed, I swear, before God, I'll pay for the best doctor on this railroad for your boy. Not just any tonic, real treatment, and I won't go back on that promise. The impact of that offer almost took Clara's breath away. It was as if fate was testing whether she had the courage to walk through the door. Her heart raced. Prudence told her to be wary of powerful men offering miracles in the dead of night. But necessity reminded her that miracles sometimes only come to those who are willing to get involved in complicated situations. She took a deep breath, approached the box, and carefully placed Leo on a spread-out coat, improvising a soft bed. She kissed the boy's sweaty forehead, as if that touch were a silent pact. Then she turned to the papers. So, show me where I begin, she said, her voice low but determined. Ethan watched that gesture attentively. Perhaps at that moment, he was as curious as she was about what might happen next. And you who are listening perhaps know that feeling, knowing that a decision can change everything, but still taking the first step. Comment on which part of Clara's choice has affected you the most so far. Clara picked up the first stack of papers, her hands still damp with sweat. The lamp flickered beside her, casting shadows that danced across the lined-up numbers. Weights, dates, train codes, destination. To anyone else, it would just be a wall of black paint. To her, at that moment, it was the only bridge between her son, who was breathing with difficulty beside her, and the hope of real treatment. She felt her heart pound in her throat. If she failed, there would be no second attempt. She took a deep breath, trying to calm her body. She remembered the nights at the saloon when she had to balance 2 full trays and still smile at a rude customer. The same technique. Focus on one thing at a time. One order, one table, one tray. Now it would be a number, a line, a wagon, the distant sound of the sleeping locomotive, the whistling of the wind passing between the tracks, all seemed to fall silent as she delved into the columns. What do you look for when you suspect a drunk? She heard her own voice inside her head. The excesses, the repetition, that which doesn't fit with the rest. You're trembling, Ethan commented, leaning close to her shoulder, more observant than critical. Clara didn't take her eyes off the paper. I'm scared, she replied sincerely, but fear doesn't stop me from working, Mr. Strickland. If it did, I would have starved to death a long time ago. He remained silent. Perhaps he wasn't used to hearing vulnerability expressed like that, with such dignity. It was as if she had pulled up a chair and sat fear down beside her, instead of pretending it didn't exist. Line by line, Clara mentally marked patterns. Wagon 17, leaving with a certain weight, arriving lighter. Wagon 32, the same thing. Always valuable cargo. Fine fabrics, weapons, expensive tools. The discount was never big enough to attract the attention of someone accustomed to losses, but adding it all up, the impact was huge. She imagined what she would do with a fraction of that money. Medicine for Leo, better food, maybe even a new bed without the springs poking her back. Why don't these wagons here have a record of who checked the weight on departure? She pointed to a group of lines. Ethan approached, curious. Because, theoretically, they were checked by the yard supervisor himself, she explained. When he signs, he doesn't fill in the employee field. Saves ink, he says. Clara frowned. Savings? Interesting. But notice something else. She picked up another stack of papers comparing dates. Whenever the weight is a problem, Mr. Marcus is on duty, always at night. When it's JR, the weight is spot on. She felt a chill. It was like watching a man lying at the table and suddenly realizing that his hand trembled whenever he talked about money. Small signs. Hidden truths that only appear to those who are truly attentive. Maybe it's a coincidence, he murmured, testing the idea aloud, more to himself than to Ethan. But coincidence is something life has taught me to distrust. We only call it a coincidence when we don't want to admit there was a thread pulling everything together. Ethan stared at the columns with a different look, as if suddenly he saw there what had previously been just background noise. "Continue," he asked in a tone that mixed order and curiosity. Clara moved on to another stack of records, now reaching other cities. He noticed that some wagons passed through an extra stop, a quick detour to a smaller yard before continuing their journey. "Why this detour here?" he asked. "Fuel," he suggested. He shook his head. "There was no need. I always thought it was strange, but the report said it was a requirement of the partner company." "Partner company," Clara repeated, her brain making connections. In the saloon, the men spoke of Marcus's company as if it were too good to be true. "And who convinced you to close this deal?" she asked, already knowing the answer before he opened his mouth. Ethan pursed his lips. "Marcus," he finally said. "He assured me it was the only way to protect our cargo from the bandits." Clara ran her finger along a column, as if following an invisible trail. "Perhaps he just changed the type of bandit, sir." The knot in her stomach tightened. She knew that every word she spoke there could become ammunition. If she was wrong, she would only be the cheeky waitress who dared to point the finger at her boss's family. If she was right, she would be poking a snake pit. Her breath became short, but she forced herself to continue. "Notice something. The initial weight, he notes, is always a little less than what the train driver registers on the scale." She pulled a piece of paper from another pile, comparing them. "Here, for example, Marcus says the wagon left with 10 crates. The scale shows a weight for 12. 2 disappear along the way, and when the wagon arrives at its destination, it seems like nobody stole them, because, on his paper, they never existed." Ethan stood motionless for a moment. The truth, when it comes out, makes no noise. It just changes everything. He ran a hand through his hair, in an almost human gesture, different from the harshness with which the city knew him. "Do you realize what this means?" he asked softly. Clara swallowed hard. "It means that someone is using your name and your money to secretly enrich themselves, and that this someone knew that you would blindly trust your own family's signature." Her legs felt weak, but not from doubt. It was from the weight of having seen something too big for her position. "If I'm wrong, you can fire me and never hear from me again," she added, unable to avoid the need to protect herself a little. "But if I'm right, you have a thief in your house." There was courage there, but also a silent plea that he wouldn't use that revelation against her. The silence that followed was broken only by the soft sound of Leo's cough. Clara looked at her son, her heart racing again. All that analysis, all that logic, was ultimately for him, for redemption, hope, a future. Ethan followed her gaze and, perhaps at that exact moment, understood that he wasn't facing an ambitious woman after easy money, but a mother in survival mode. "You just showed me in half an hour what I didn't see in 3 months of reports," she murmured finally. "That's no small thing." She felt her hands relax slightly. A small spark of pride ignited in her chest. Not that vain pride, but the kind that says, "I'm no small thing." "So what are you going to do now?" she ventured to ask. Ethan took a few steps, walked to the tracks, and stood there for a moment staring into the darkness. He seemed to weigh not only numbers, but decisions, impacts, consequences. When he turned, there was a new hardness in his eyes. "Now I'm going to settle accounts with whoever thought they could steal from me. And I'm going to start by paying my fair share with you." He returned to the lamp, took a somewhat crumpled checkbook from his inside pocket, a sign of constant use. He filled in an amount she had never seen in her entire life combined. He held the paper out to her. Clara hesitated, her fingers trembling before touching that promise of change. "This ye is for today," he explained, "but it's not all I have in mind." Her head spun. It was as if life was opening once again, another unexpected door. "And so I ask you, in that place of pressure and fear, would you accept this paper, or would you distrust it? Comment below which part of this test most affected you." Clara held the check as if it was something too fragile to exist. The paper felt warm between her fingers, and the fresh ink of the amount made her eyes burn, not with joy, but with shock. It was enough money to change the course of an entire life, and that was precisely why she was suspicious. In the West, a large gift never came without a string tied to it. She looked up at Ethan, searching his face for any sign of cruel mischief, but found only the icy firmness of a man accustomed to deciding destinies. "I don't even know where to cash this," she blurted out in a whisper, and she hated sounding small. "You're not going to deduct it," Ethan replied curtly. He gestured, and one of the men pulled a small leather case with a wax seal from his pocket. "Tomorrow morning before the 8 o'clock train, my doctor will be at your door." Clara felt her chest tighten. "A real doctor?" Ethan tilted his chin. "The best my line can bring, and he'll bring what your son needs." She looked at Leo, still feverish, and hope came like an indecent breath, the kind that makes you want to laugh and cry at the same time. But along with it came guilt, the feeling of stealing a miracle he didn't deserve. "And what do you want in return?" Clara asked bluntly. Her voice came out harsher than she intended, but it was fear defending what little dignity she had left. Ethan wasn't offended. He even seemed to expect it. "I want you close," he said. "I want you to use those eyes on me. You saw the hidden truth in my papers. You'll see the hidden truth in people." Clara swallowed hard. "I'm a waitress. You're a survivor," he corrected. "And survivors understand what goes on behind the scenes. Who lies, who pretends, who steals with a smile." He took a step closer. "Only one condition, silence. If I let you into my world, you can't go around telling what you see." The wind blew and the lamp's flame flickered, as if the courtyard itself held its breath. Clara felt the transformation unfolding, but she also felt the weight of the decision. To accept meant to breathe, but breathing inside the house of a powerful man could become imprisonment. She thought of the saloon, the owner's face, the traveler's disdainful gaze, the coin that was always missing, and she thought of her son. Fierce love is not poetry, it's a difficult choice. "I accept the doctor," she said, and the way she spoke made it clear that this was all she would allow herself to promise for now. Ethan nodded, as if respecting her resistance. "That's enough for today." The armed man brought a better blanket and helped Clara settle Leo down. Ethan took off his own coat and placed it over the boy with a brusqueness that seemed like poorly disguised kindness. "He'll be all right," he murmured, as if speaking more to himself. Clara didn't know what to say. A railroad baron shouldn't care about a child's fever in the saloon, and yet there he was, kneeling for a moment, checking the little one's breathing with silent attention. It stirred her in a dangerous way. Hope, when mixed with vulnerability, becomes a trap for the heart. They led her to a closed carriage too clean for that dusty ground. The smell of new leather and varnished wood filled her nostrils, and Clara felt dirty, out of place, as if she had entered a church with muddy shoes. On the way back, the city seemed different. The same crooked houses, the same dark windows, but now with the feeling that she was crossing an invisible line. She passed the saloon and saw, through the glass, 2 men playing cards, as if nothing had happened. The lives of others went on. Hers did not. At dawn, the doctor arrived, his promise fulfilled. He was a man with a thin mustache, a metal briefcase, and a serious demeanor, as if he had seen much death. He examined Leo, asked questions, and jotted things down in a notebook. Clara stood in a corner, clenching her hands, trying to read some sentence in his face. When the doctor finally looked up, his voice was firm. "He needs tonic and rest, and he needs it now, not later." Clara felt her legs go weak. I don't have... "It's already paid for," the man interrupted, and that hurt and saved her at the same time. Then came the clothes. Not out of vanity, but as a rule. One of Ethan's men appeared with a package wrapped in brown paper and said, without smiling, that it was an order from his boss. If you're going to accompany him on business, you can't dress like you're begging. Clara opened it and saw a simple yet well-cut dress, good fabric, the color of a cloudy sky. She felt ashamed. She felt grateful. She felt angry that she needed it. She dressed and stared at herself in the broken mirror of the room, trying to recognize her own image. She looked like an imposter wearing someone else's skin, and deep down, she feared that someone would notice and throw her out, like one throws dogs out of a hotel room. Late in the afternoon, the same horse-drawn carriage returned. Leo was sleeping better, breathing with less effort, and this gave Clara such great relief it almost hurt. She kissed her son, left him in the care of the landlady, and promised to return before nightfall, a promise she didn't know if she could keep. When she climbed into the carriage, she felt the city watching. They weren't real eyes, perhaps, but she knew that feeling, as if the walls were whispering. Who does she think she is? She's selling herself. It's going to end worse. The West was cruel to women who tried to rise up. Ethan's property was secluded, with long fences, rows of trees, and a different kind of silence, heavy with money and control. A servant opened the gate without asking questions. Clara descended slowly, feeling the new dress cling to her skin as a betrayal. The house, large and cold, seemed more like a fortress than a home. A butler greeted her, overly polite, and asked her name, as if he didn't know it. Clara Miller. As she said it, she felt a shiver. It was the first time her own name had sounded important there. "Mr. Strickland is waiting for you in the library," the man announced, and Clara realized that her life had just entered a dead end. But then, as she passed through the main hall, she heard a woman's laugh coming from inside, soft and dangerous, like a knife wrapped in velvet. Which detail gave you the biggest pang in your chest, the doctor's help or her shock upon entering this new world? The laughter wafted from the hall like an overly sweet, cloying perfume. Clara followed the butler, each step echoing on the waxed floor, feeling that her new dress betrayed her presence more than any shout. When she passed through the wide door, she saw the source of the laughter, a tall, slender woman in a red silk dress that hugged her body as if sewn directly onto her skin. Her blonde hair was styled in an elaborate updo, and a necklace of light-colored stones gleamed in the lamplight as if it were fire. She held a crystal goblet with as much ease as Clara held a plate in the saloon. "So this is Clara Miller." The woman's voice came before any official introduction, laden with curiosity and venom. Ethan stood near the fireplace, arms crossed, as if trying to control the atmosphere with his posture alone. "Clara, this is Veronica Hart," he finally said. "My fiancée." The word struck her like a thunderclap. Fiancé. Suddenly, everything seemed even more out of place. The paid doctor, the invitation, his watchful gaze in the courtyard. Clara felt her face flush, not from love but from anticipated shame. What story would a woman like Veronica conjure up in her head upon seeing her there? Veronica took a few steps toward Clara, analyzing her from head to toe like someone examining a horse before buying it. "So you're the saloon girl," she commented with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I heard you have special talents." Clara swallowed hard. "I only understood some papers," she replied simply. "Anyone could have done it." Veronica chuckled. "Not just anyone, my lawyers couldn't, Ethan's foreman couldn't, but the waitress, oh, she managed to figure out what nobody else saw. It's fascinating, don't you think?" She turned to Ethan, still smiling, or worrying. The way Veronica pronounced the word waitress burned more than the nights of work. It wasn't the profession, it was the inherent contempt, as if being at the bottom were a character flaw. Clara felt anger rising, that anger that poor women learn to hide so as not to be called hysterical. But this time, there was something different about it, a warning. She realized that this woman wasn't just bothered by her presence. Veronica felt threatened. "And your son?" the blonde continued, as if discussing the weather. "They say he's sick. It must be hard for you to depend so much on Ethan's favors." The blow was direct. Touching her son was touching his most vulnerable point. Clara took a deep breath, trying to control her voice. "I'm not here out of pity," she replied firmly. "He asked me for help with a problem. I helped. We're even." Inside, she knew it wasn't that simple. The emotional debt she felt for the doctor, for the medicine, for the coat on Leo, none of that could be erased with words. But she also knew that if she showed too much submission there, Veronica would crush her mercilessly. That room was a silent battlefield. Ethan stepped forward, perhaps to ease the tension. "Veronica, I called Clara because I need someone who can see what others can't," he explained, in a tone that tried to be conciliatory, but ended up sounding even more complimentary to Clara. "She discovered in one night what your network wasn't able to perceive." The word network had a venom of its own. Veronica narrowed her eyes. "My network, as you call it, is what keeps your name clean among investors, darling," she retorted. "And that's exactly why it worries me to see you placing so much trust in a stranger." Clara felt the strange arrow pierce her skin. It was true. She was an intruder in that world, someone who had crossed the fence without permission. But instead of recoiling, something inside her straightened up. She remembered the saloon tables, how a single glance was enough to know who was going to cause trouble. Veronica was one of those women who smiled with their lips and sharpened knives with their eyes. "I didn't ask for anyone's trust," Clara said, choosing her words carefully. "I only did what any mother would do if she had a chance to save her child. If Mr. Strickland wants me to leave, I will. I don't depend on your approval." Veronica tilted her head, surprised for a second by the answer. Then the smile returned, colder. "Brave. I like brave people. They fall from great heights." She moved so close that Clara could smell her perfume. Sweet, expensive, full of notes that have no name in the dictionary of someone who lives counting pennies. "Some advice, Clara Miller? Know your place. The West is dangerous for those who forget where they came from, and men like Ethan, she gave him a quick look, half affection, half threat. Men like him like new toys, but they get bored quickly. Clara felt a shiver run down her spine. Not because of what Veronica was implying about Ethan, but because of the underlying message. She would always be seen as disposable, an experiment, a whim. And if she let that sink in, she would lose the only defense she had, the certainty that, above all, she was a mother. She wasn't there to be accepted by ladies in red dresses. She was there because an opportunity had opened up, and she needed to learn how to navigate it. But the pain of being attacked in such a sensitive place, as a woman, as a mother, as a poor person, made a part of her want to disappear. "This is unnecessary, Veronica," Ethan finally intervened. His tone wasn't affectionate. It was cold, threatening. "Clara isn't a toy, and if I'm alive financially today, it's because she exposed a traitor under my roof." Veronica turned slowly to him, her smile fading completely. "And since when do you need an outsider to tell you who to trust?" she asked, hurt. "I've been by your side for years, holding things together with investors, mayors, judges, and suddenly a waitress walks through the door and has more say than me." Therein lay the real conflict. It wasn't just female jealousy. It was a power struggle. Veronica didn't just want Ethan's heart. She wanted the decision-making circle, the seat next to his when important papers were signed. And now she saw another figure, unlikely and awkward, emerging as a key player. Clara saw this clearly, and however painful it was to be the target of her anger, something inside her understood that this rival wanted much more than to see her out of the house. Veronica wanted to bring her down in an exemplary way, so that it would serve as a lesson to anyone else who dared. Clara took a deep breath. If she retreated now, she would become marked prey. If she advanced too far, she would become an open threat. She needed to find a middle ground, a kind of silent courage. "I know my place very well," she said finally. "It's beside my son. Everything else is just a passageway." Veronica's gaze gleamed with something that could be respect or contempt. "We'll see," she murmured, bringing the glass back to her lips. Ethan ran a hand over his face, tired, as if realizing the magnitude of the storm he himself had created by bringing Clara close. When the butler announced that the horses were ready to take them to a meeting with some important men in the city, Veronica went to the mirror, adjusted a strand of hair, and offered one last comment without looking at Clara. "Don't be late, darling. In the world out there, punctuality is the only virtue expected of people like you." Clara felt her blood boil, but swallowed her reply. She realized then that the battle would not be between equal forces, and that every gesture, every phrase, every piece of clothing she wore could be used against her. And you, listening to this scene, have you ever experienced something similar? Being in a place that didn't seem to belong to you, with someone trying to belittle you just to feel bigger? Comment on which part of this confrontation resonated most with you. The night after dinner with the important men seemed to promise some rest. Clara returned to the boarding house with her body aching, but with the strange feeling that for the first time, she had been heard in a room full of expensive hats. She had whispered in Ethan's ear about a farmer who lied by the way he gripped his napkin. She had warned him about a judge too drunk to be trusted, and he had heard. This was new. She returned to her humble room, kissed Leo, felt her fever subside, and her heart allowed itself a breath. Maybe things are changing, she thought, resting her forehead against her son's. Maybe I can give you a better future. But change in the West tends to bother those who profit from things the way they've always been. On the morning of her third day in her new role, Clara arrived at the main house while the sun was still low. The butler, who had previously greeted her with a neutral nod, now barely raised his eyes. There was something different in the air, like the metallic smell before a storm. She found it strange, but followed the corridor to the library, already accustomed to the route. The door, which was usually ajar, was closed this time, and there were two henchmen stationed there, their expressions hard, their hands near their holsters. "Mr. Ethan asked you to wait here," one of them said, without looking directly at her. Clara's heart raced for no apparent reason. When the door finally opened, it wasn't Ethan's face she saw first, but Veronica's calculated smile, seated to the right of the desk, legs crossed, as if watching a show. Ethan stood with his back to the window, his shoulders tense. The air was so cold that Clara felt the urge to pull up her shawl even inside that warm house. "Did someone call me?" she tried, forcing her voice to sound normal. Ethan turned slowly, and what she found on his face wasn't the mixture of curiosity and respect she'd grown accustomed to seeing these past few days. It was something hard, almost strange, as if he were looking at her for the first time. "Do you have something to tell me, Clara?" The phrase, just like that, without context, came as a slap in the face. "It depends. About what?" She searched for some clue, some hint. Veronica calmly intertwined her fingers. "About your little meeting last night, for example, or about the telegram you sent using my name." "Telegram?" Clara felt the floor tilt slightly. "I didn't send any telegram." Ethan tossed a yellowed sheet of paper onto the table, its typewritten letters scattered across it. "Acknowledgement of delivery," he explained, his voice too firm. "Telegram sent from the station at 10 o'clock tonight, signed by you. Recipient, Marcus Thorne." Seeing the forbidden name there in black and white made her stomach churn. "That's a lie," she murmured. "Yesterday I was here with you. We went by carriage and came back late. You know that." Veronica chuckled. "Oh, my dear, the world is big, and telegrams can be prepared in advance." Clara stepped forward, indignant. "I don't even know how to write a telegram properly. And why would I warn Marcus about anything? He's the one I pointed out as the thief." She sought Ethan's gaze, pleading without saying, "Listen to me." But there was another sheet of paper on the table, a bank statement. "And this?" He held up the document. "Deposit made earlier today in your name, a generous sum, coming from an account linked to, guess what? Marcus's company." Her vision blurred for a moment. "I didn't receive anything. The only money I had was the check you yourself gave me, and I didn't even touch it. It's kept at the boarding house if you want to see it." Veronica leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "Powerful men attract all sorts of people, Ethan, some very talented at playing the victim." She turned to Clara, her tone like tearing silk. "From the beginning, I warned you that this story of the desperate mother who suddenly solves the railroad owner's problem was too strange. It's the kind of plot that seems scripted." The sentence hit Clara hard, who felt like a character in a play staged by someone else. "Are you calling me a liar?" she whispered. "I'm calling you a traitor," Ethan replied, cutting like a knife. "I opened the accounts of my company, my family, my life for you. I let you into my house, and in return, what do I get? A telegram to the man who's been robbing me for months. A suspicious deposit into your account. Photographs of you entering the station late at night." He threw a small stack of blurry photos onto the table, but enough to show someone in a skirt and shawl passing through the station door. "That's not me in that photo," Clara tried, although she knew that for anyone who wanted to believe the worst, any shadow would do. That was precisely the deepest pain, realizing that, in the end, the decision wasn't about evidence, but about who he chose to believe. She felt a lump rise in her throat. "Ethan, you looked me in the eyes when you promised to take care of my son. I would never do anything to jeopardize that. I wouldn't even know where to begin betraying you. I don't understand these games." He pinched the bridge of his nose as if tired. "That's what scares me. You pretend not to understand, but you acted like a grown man. You entered my life through my weakest point, compassion." Veronica feigned sorrow. "It's sad, really, but that's how these types act. They know how to use vulnerability as currency. First, the story of the sick child, then the sudden talent with numbers, and when you realize it, you've already given everything away." Clara felt naked. Every tear, every sincere confession about Leo's fever was suddenly read as a weapon of manipulation. It was like having her soul stolen. "If you think that about me, nothing I say here will make a difference," she murmured, her voice faltering. Ethan straightened up coldly. "I still have a company to save, and I can't risk keeping it around while Marcus and his accomplices try to take me down." He gestured to the men at the door. "You're dismissed, Clara. From now on, any attempt to enter my property will be considered trespassing." The word dismissed seemed too polite for the violence it carried. It wasn't just a job she was losing. It was the recent hope of finally being in a place where she could be more than the saloon girl, and the doctor, and Leo's treatment. The question escaped before she could swallow. Her voice came out in pieces. "He still needs—" Ethan interrupted her harshly. "My commitment was to you, as long as I believed in your loyalty. I don't pay ransom to someone who stabs me in the back." Those words were worse than the humiliation of the $0 on the table. That night of the empty tip, she could still blame a stranger. Now, it hurt because she had let this man take the place of her hopes. She had begun to trust him, against all prudence, and it was precisely that trust that was now crushing her. The henchman approached, ready to lead her to the exit. Clara tried one more time, not out of pride, but out of a mother's desperation. "I swear on my son's life that I didn't do anything. If someone is plotting this, it's because they're afraid of what I might see." You know from here that this story is too easy." She put her hand to her chest, as if she could rip out her heart and show it. Ethan hesitated for a moment, and Clara saw a millimeter of doubt cross his eyes. But Veronica touched his arm gently. "Enough, darling. She's deceived you enough already." That touch sealed the fate. "Take her away," he ordered, without looking at her again. And with that, something inside Clara broke. It wasn't just the job, the big house, the dress. It was the part of her that believed that if she was honest, if she worked hard, one day someone higher up would see her value. They went down the corridor, almost dragging her, while some servants looked sideways, some with pity, others with complacency. She heard a whisper, "I knew it wouldn't last." And that phrase was like a nail in the coffin of her self-esteem. Outside, the sky threatened rain. They practically threw her into the empty cart. The way back to town seemed longer. Each bump of the road brought back recent memories. The doctor opening the suitcase, Ethan covering Leo with his coat, the first time he listened to her without interrupting. Now all of that seemed like a scene from a story that hadn't happened. Arriving at the boarding house, she found her son sleeping, his cheek flushed from the medicine that might be his last. She hugged him with a strength bordering on despair and cried silently so as not to wake him. That night, lying beside the boy on a narrow mattress, Clara stared at the wooden ceiling and felt a grief that defied words. Grief for a future that seemed to have slipped through her fingers. Grief for broken trust. Grief for having believed, even knowing that the world is not kind to people like her. Perhaps you have felt this before, when, in addition to the present pain, comes that cruel voice saying, "I should have known." Comment on which part of Clara's fall most deeply affected you now. The morning after the fall, Clara woke up with burning eyes, but with a decision burning stronger than the pain. She spent the night reviewing every detail of the setup, the telegram, the deposit, the blurry photos. Nothing matched the truth she carried inside. At some point, while Leo breathed heavily beside her, she remembered what she had learned in those days. Numbers can lie if manipulated, speeches can be rehearsed, but physical traces, those are harder to erase. If they had forged a telegram, someone had actually gone to the station. If they had deposited money into her account, someone had signed that paper. And if someone went to all this trouble, it was because her presence bothered them more than they admitted. The clock in the boarding house struck almost 9 when Clara got out of bed, straightened her shoulders, and dressed in the only nice dress she owned. She looked at Leo, still feeling the effects of his last tonic, and spoke softly as if making a vow. "If they want to paint me as a bandit, they'll have to look me in the face when I show them who the real thief is." It wasn't about regaining her place in the big house. It was about clearing her own name. She knew that if she silently accepted the label of traitor, she would carry that mark forever, and her son would inherit that shadow. Instead of going to the saloon to ask for her job back, she took another route. She went straight to the station where the telegraph office was located. The clerk, a thin young man in a worn vest, widened his eyes when he saw her. The whole town must already know the story. "I need to see yesterday's logbook," she said bluntly. He scratched the back of his neck hesitantly. "That's company information, ma'am." Clara approached, placed both hands on the counter, and let her voice come out with the force of someone who has nothing left to lose. "Look at me. Did you see me here last night?" The young man studied her, confused. "No, ma'am. The last woman who came here yesterday was wearing a red dress. She came with bodyguards. She sent a telegram out of state." Red dress. Clara's blood ran cold. She asked, almost begging, to see the book. The young man yielded, swayed more by the weight of her gaze than by any argument. There, written in neat handwriting, was the message sent in the name of Clara Miller, intended Marcus Thorne, signed VH in the margins, in a quick scribble that someone distracted would call nothing. But Clara wasn't distracted. She knew that scent of discreet poison. Veronica Hart wasn't just the jealous fiancée, she was the hand pulling the strings. There was still another piece missing, proving that the money that appeared in her account came from an order Ethan hadn't given. She went to the small town bank, where she was hardly welcome. The manager, a man with thinning hair and a protruding belly, rolled his eyes when he saw her enter. "We're not opening new accounts today." "I don't want to open anything," she replied firmly. "I want to see who authorized the deposit in my name." He laughed. "And you really think we're going to show you?" Clara felt her heart race. "If you don't show me, tomorrow all the farmers will know that the bank accepts being used in dirty schemes." The man paled. The West lived on reputation. Grumbling, he brought out a thick book of internal records. There on the line referring to the amount that accused her was the authorization, a transfer slip attached with a seal from Marcus's company. The digitized signature was Ethan's, but the bank authorization stamp bore a different date and a detail that caught Clara's attention: the marking of the place of issue. It wasn't the railway's main office, but the small registration post located on Veronica's property on the other side of the river. She might not understand complex finances, but she recognized behind-the-scenes manipulation. Someone had used Ethan's name and signature in a place where he rarely set foot. With the telegraph book in her head, the memory of the red dress and that detail on the paper, Clara pieced together the puzzle. The hidden truth was there. Veronica and Marcus had moved ahead, calmly preparing everything, waiting only for the right moment to bring her down and, incidentally, weaken Ethan to take control of the business. Few people would dare to confront this duo, but she was no longer interested in comfort. She left the bank with trembling legs, but with something new growing inside her chest, a serene, almost stubborn courage. That day, there would be a large meeting at the city hall. Ethan, Veronica, farmers, the judge, investors, all gathered to discuss the expansion of the railroad line. It would be the perfect stage for a public execution of reputations, and, if she did nothing, the only reputation killed there would remain hers. On the way to the building, a light rain began to fall, sticking strands of hair to her face. Clara didn't care. She crossed the square with her head held high, hearing whispers, feeling gazes weighing on her simple dress. Each step was a decision not to turn back. The armed men at the chamber door tried to stop her. "Closed meeting," she raised her chin. "My story was discussed here without my presence. Today, I enter." Before they could answer her, a familiar voice echoed from the lobby. Ethan, hearing the commotion, had approached. When he saw her, the impact was visible. Surprise followed by harshness. "I thought I had made it clear about not appearing on my properties anymore," he said coldly. Clara held firmly the two papers she carried, a copy of the telegraph and bank records. "And I thought you cared about the truth," she retorted, without lowering her eyes. The hall was full when they entered. Veronica, impeccable in her red dress, was chatting with the judge, laughing softly. Upon seeing Clara, her expression froze for a second, before recovering with a condescending smile. "Well, look at that. The ghost has returned." Some men laughed, others looked on curiously. Clara felt her face flush, but she didn't let shame paralyze her. "I didn't come here to beg for anything," she said loudly, projecting the words so everyone could hear. "I came to return what they put on top of me." She went to the central table and placed the papers before Ethan, aware of all eyes on her. "This is the telegram record from yesterday. The woman who sent a message to Marcus Thorne using my name wasn't me. It was a lady in a red dress signing VH. A murmur ran through the room. Veronica maintained her composure, but her fingers gripped the glass tightly. "That proves nothing," she tried. "Anyone can write my initials." Clara turned to the telegraph operator, who had been called to deliver a message and was standing there in the corner, stunned. "Was it her?" she pointed. The young man swallowed hard. He knew that any answer would have an impact, but he also knew the weight of his own lie. "Yes, it was her. She arrived with bodyguards. I recognize her." The silence that followed was heavy. Clara seized the moment and showed the other document. "And here," he continued, "the deposit slip they said I received. The authorization was given at a place you, Ethan, almost never set foot in. I've seen you work. You don't delegate signatures like that. But someone with access to your handwriting and the bank's trust would do it. Someone who has an interest in seeing you surrounded by enemies and alone." Her eyes met Veronica's. It was no longer a request, it was an accusation. Ethan picked up the papers, examined them carefully, as if, this time, he wanted to be sure before deciding whom to believe. His mind, trained in business, connected dots he had previously ignored for convenience. He remembered how many times Veronica had mentioned Marcus as indispensable, how she had been quick to portray Clara as a threat. He also remembered the waitress's sincere gaze in the railroad yard, the nights of conversation when she never asked for anything more than a chance for her son. The scales, which had previously tipped against Clara, began to shift. "Veronica," he called, his voice low but heavy with gravity. "Do you want to explain why your name appears instead of Clara's?" She gave a nervous laugh. "Ethan, my love, you know these people. The boy must be confused. And these papers, God knows who she bribed to fabricate them." Clara felt the old anger rising, but this time she wasn't powerless. "I don't have money to bribe even the postman," she replied, "but I have something you seem to have forgotten. Memory." I was with you the night you said I sent the telegram, and while you slept in soft beds, someone donned my skin to tarnish my name, the farmers whispered uncomfortably. No one liked seeing themselves reflected in injustice. The judge cleared his throat, realizing this could turn into a scandal. Perhaps for the first time Ethan saw the scene from the outside, as Clara did, the web of interests, the behind-the-scenes manipulations, how much he himself had been manipulated. Guilt flashed before his eyes, followed by something heavier, shame. He dropped the glass of drink he held in his hand, the crystal clinking against the wood. Enough, he murmured. He turned to Veronica, his jaw clenched. Since when have you and Marcus been using my name to launder money? She tried to grab his arm, but he pulled away. You're mistaken. She's bewitching you, Ethan. Men like you fall for redemption stories easily. But this time the spell didn't work. Perhaps the real transformation was in his mindset, finally willing to look at his own blindness. He signaled to the railroad men present. I want a full audit of the accounts related to Miss Hart's property. And Marcus, as of today, he's off the job. If he runs away, consider him guilty. Veronica lost her color. The mask of an elegant lady cracked, and Clara saw behind it the hunger she had always perceived. You're throwing away years of work because of some nobody, she hissed. Ethan took a deep breath. He looked at Clara, then at the crowded room. It's not because of her. It's because of what I've become, letting people like you convince me to distrust the only person who had nothing to gain by betraying me. There was pain there, but also a kind of liberation. He approached Clara in public without hiding it. His eyes, once cold, now held a plea for forgiveness that hadn't yet been put into words. Clara, I was wrong about you, he finally said, his voice hoarse. I let my old wounds speak louder than your truth. And I almost did to you what the world always does, use and discard. She looked at him, still wounded. You almost took away not only my hope, but my son's doctor. He nodded, the weight of that sentence falling entirely upon him. I know, and no check can fix that. But if you still have any courage left, I want you to know the door that opened that night in the courtyard remains open, not as a favor, as a partnership. Clara felt her heart beat faster. Saying yes wasn't easy. Her wounded trust demanded caution. But looking around, she saw more than just Ethan's figure. She saw all those men watching a poor woman prove her innocence with evidence, not tears. She saw the impact of a truth that only came to light because she refused to play the role of a silent victim, and she saw within herself a new strength, built upon each humiliation, each sleepless night, each difficult decision. If I agree to come back, she said slowly, it will be on one condition, Mr. Strickland. He raised his eyebrows, ready to listen. Please never again make decisions about me without hearing me out first. Not as an employee, not as a mother, not as a woman. A brief smile appeared at the corner of his mouth, not of mockery, but of respect. Deal, he replied. And by the way, I think it's time we stopped with this sir and madam business. He extended his hand, not as a boss, but as an equal. Ethan. Clara looked at that strong hand, remembering the note under the plate, the 0 tip, the night on the trails. Then for the first time, he smiled a full smile. Clara, he replied, accepting. As they shook hands, something inside her finally calmed. Not because everything was resolved, the West would remain harsh, the battles would continue, but because she had learned the most precious lesson. No one can decide your worth for you. She proved her innocence, saved her own name, and ensured that her son would have not only medicine, but a mother who didn't bow to the label they tried to attach to her. And I'm curious to know, at what point in this final turning point did you feel that lump in your throat? When she entered the meeting soaked in the rain, when she exposed the setup, or when she demanded to be treated as an equal? Comment on which scene touched your heart the most. If you've walked with Clara this far, enduring every humiliation, every twist of fate, and every courage she's forcibly extracted from, thank you for staying. Stories like this, of ordinary people facing giants, remind us that the heart still has breath, even when the world seems hopeless. If this video touched you in any way, if at any point you saw yourself a little in this mother fighting for her son, it's worth subscribing to Lágrimas do Sertão. That's what we do here. Tell stories that are heartbreaking but also comforting, and that help us look at our own journey with more truth and hope. So I know who was steadfast and stayed until the end. Leave a simple comment. I'm with you until the end. That way I know you were there on the other side, feeling every step with Clara. And if this story touched your heart, leave a like too, not as an obligation, but as that silent gesture of keep going, This made sense to me. Right over there's another video waiting for you, with another story of overcoming adversity and a turnaround that resonates with everything we're experiencing today. Click and stay with me there, because there are still many tears, much strength, and much life for us to share.